certain best practices, which I will come into shortly. But for now, let's talk about IAM role. IAM role is again very much similar to user. So generally, we get into a discussion when we should use user, when we should use role, right? So whenever there is a activity that needs to be performed in a short term, or you need short term credential, you can go for role. So IAM role is also an IAM separate entity that you can create with an IAM console. And again, you can also define a set of permissions. You can also provide list of privileges to access AWS resources or AWS services. It is pretty much similar to IAM user, but this role has got short-term credentials, or in other way, I would say it doesn't have a permanent credential assigned like the user. So if you are logging into an user account, so you will use a username and then a password combination, right? This password you will rotate it as per the organization standard, maybe once in 6 months or once in 3 months or whatever. But then the password is the same, which you will use today, tomorrow, and so on. But then with IAM role, there is no permanent credential that is attached to it. Instead, what happens is whenever you are using this AWS IAM role, there is a backend service called security token service. Okay, so the security token service, it generates a short-term token credential that will be used for authorization, and then whatever activities that they perform, we can also mention the session duration also. Okay, so how long this token should be valid, and then you can also go for maximum, or you can also set that on the settings menu, and then you can use that secure token service. So this security token service, it will generate a short-term token, and that token is equivalent to a password credential in IAM user. So a role doesn't have a permanent credential. Instead, it generates a temporary credential, and it will be used for accessing the services until the session is there. By default, the session is about 12 hours, but then if you want to increase it to a maximum number of hours or whatever, right, you can utilize it. Sorry, by default, the session duration is 1 hour. And if you want to increase it, you can also increase it to 12 hours, or based on the shift, right? Maybe 8 hours shift or 9 hours shift. If you have, you can have some 9 hours as a standard. So that way they don't have to really log in back again and again in a single working day. So you can, by default, it is valid for 1 hour, and you can increase it to 12 hours or whatever duration you want to. So this IAM role, as I said, it does not have any permanent credential, does not have any permanent credential, but instead the security token service will generate a short-term token or a temporary token that can be used for accessing a particular resource or performing a certain activities instead of using a IAM user. So there are, I mean, in other words, like people on the premises, they used to create this service account or managed identities or managed identity for doing certain tasks from instance or from an application or from a service, right? You can also use this IAM role as a service linked role. So I will show you how to create this, and then how to assume this, or how to attach this. There are various methods that you can use this IAM role. And recently, AWS has also come up with something called IAM roles anywhere. So nowadays, like a lot of organizations are going with multi-cloud and hybrid cloud combinations, right? So when I say hybrid cloud, they have some workloads on the premises in their own data center and some workloads on AWS, and some customers are using multi-cloud, right? Some resources are in Azure or AWS or GCP. So what you can do is IAM roles anywhere is a service that you can use to allow access to workloads that run outside of AWS platform, maybe on the data center or on Azure platform or whatever, right? So you can grant access to those services also using IAM roles anywhere. So AWS is evolving. So day by day, they are coming up with new features, functionalities. So these functionalities were not available a couple of years back, but now they have started giving you a lot of governance activities, integration for hybrid and multi-cloud. Earlier, like 5 years back, IAM as a service was a kind of standalone directory service only for AWS based access or AWS services access. But now if you look at the list of offering that they have got identity center where you can have multiple accounts managed from one single console. They've got AD connector to connect to your on-premises existing Active Directory environment. You can also have a standalone AD environment within AWS, or if you want to have an enterprise grade Active Directory, that is also available. And they also have options for application developers to create users or create roles and then provide permissions for application level. And even they have got options where you can also create role and allow workloads running outside of AWS to have access for a particular set of tasks and activities. So things are evolving. This will continue to happen, and you might always have to, as a solutions architect, it is very important. Today there might not be a feature that is readily available, but maybe next week or tomorrow they might have released a new feature. So you have to stay tuned with AWS blogs, Twitter channel, and all the handles that they have online. So that way you get to understand what is happening on a regular basis with AWS. If I mean, always try to attend the reinvent and whatever forum that is possible, and as time permits, try to stay connected with the AWS social networking forums, so that way you get to know what has been introduced, what kind of new features functionalities are getting released. So there will be changes that will be continuously constant with all the public cloud providers. So now coming to creating a role, okay, I will show you how to create a role first, and maybe I will create two different example. One where I will show you how to use service to access the resources, or maybe like we will use one AWS account. This is very common. Okay, so I will. Okay, let me just see if I have got any users which we can use for demo. Okay, these are all something that I used a couple of years back. Okay, I'll create something now. Yesterday we created few, but then we deleted it. So let's go with Sadiq. I will provide him access. Create access. Auto-generated password. Okay, I'm not giving him any kind of permission. I'm just going with plain user. Even I have not attached any policy permissions, nothing, right? I've just created. So this is the unique console, which we saw yesterday also, right? So you can use the account name or the account ID, which is the 12-digit number. And this is the username. And this is the password. Okay, so we will use this account for today's practice. New incognito window. And I will copy this. So to clarify to the question that Manjula had at the beginning of the session, right? See, for example, when I'm trying to log into this account, so there are two options here. Okay, so sign in with root user email and then sign in as a IAM user. So root user is complete account owner that performs all the tasks without any restriction, right? IAM user is someone who does the regular routine operational activities or daily tasks. Okay, so we are trying with IAM user. So you can either enter the 12-digit account or the company organization friendly name that you want to use, and then log into that. And you can just say to next, and then you can give the username and password. See, if I use this root user account here, okay, so I'm entering the right credential, but it will not allow me because my root account is not a IAM user. It is a single sign-on account from AWS. You can directly log into AWS account using the root user, but not to a particular account.
Yes.
Yeah.
Understood.
Okay. Fine. So now I'm just using the IAM user for logging into a IAM account. Yeah. So the more you practice, the more you spend time on console, you will get to understand the concepts clearly. But I know like there will some doubts will always remain when we go with theoretical discussions and understanding. So now this account does not have access to any resources, right? Be it EC2, even if you go to EC2, he will not have access to read any resources. Everything will be API error. He will not be even able to see the number of security groups or instances, and even for S3 also he will not have access to see the bucket. There are of course there are a couple of buckets that is there in my account, but he will not be able to see because he does not have the privileges or permissions to even read them, right? So now if I want to give him access to a particular stuff, what I can do is I can just go to create a role. So this is a different method, right? Yesterday we saw a method on how to give permissions, right? Using the policies. There are two type of policies: AWS managed policy and then customer managed policy. So within managed policy, if you are creating a custom policy, that means like the existing AWS managed policy, there are 1,200 plus policies, right? Which is not enough, or which is not matching your responsibilities. You might go and create the policy as per the need. But then this is also another method where you can go and create IAM role for specific credentials or specific permissions, right? And once after you create that role, this role can be assumed, or this role can be attached to a particular service. I'll show both the examples, and you will see these things on a regular stuff in office environment. Okay, let me go and just create a IAM role. Okay, so I'm still with my root account. I'm just going to select the AWS account. So for this account, I'm going to give permission. So I can also enforce, okay, I can also enforce that the particular individual should have multi-factor authentication. Without multi-factor, if they are trying to access with single credentials, they will not be able to access resources. You can also enforce that when you create the role. And here I can also use the one which I have created yesterday, or I can just go with specific existing AWS managed policy. I'm just giving him access only for S3, right? And then see, always try and utilize the um, uh, JSON document. Okay, so the more the time you spend on JSON document, you will be able to understand it very clearly. So I will just give some name here. So I will just say S3 permission for IAM role, just for my understanding. Okay, so I can just go and edit it. See, for example, if you want to edit it, so here, okay, click on next, add permissions. Okay, so this has got the effect allow, assume role, and then the AWS account. So here, if you want to give access only for a specific resource, right, that also could be done. Let me, so this is permissions policy. And okay, so let me try to create this role first, and then I will show you how to do that. So I just created a role. Now coming to the user console here, okay, and then go to Sadik. So here for Sadik, you can also add permissions for him. So there are two ways. You can add inline policy, or you can also add permission. If I click on add permission, this will help me to go and attach the policies directly. So whatever the policy that I've created, right? Uh, S3. Just a second, attach policies. Just 1 second, let me cancel this. Add permission. Click next. No, I don't want to do an inline policy. One second. Let me just do it the other way around. Create a policy, go to JSON. So yeah, let me show you this option also. See, JSON, this is the structure as we discussed yesterday. It has got 5 to 6 elements within that JSON structure. It is asking us a statement ID. Statement ID is something which you can give allow access to S3 or whatever, and then the effect is something allow for now. And if you have conflicting effects like deny and allow, deny will always override allow if you have conflicting policies. So action, what I'm trying to give here is I just want to give him option or access to assume the role. Okay, when I say assume the role through secure token service, I'm just trying to allow him to assume the role. Okay, and then if there is a error on a particular line, it will go you shows that there is a syntax error, maybe missing comma or missing double quotes or something, right? And when it comes to the resource, I don't want to give complete access to the account. Generally we will limit access to specific role or specific bucket or whatever, right? So here what I will do is I will just give access for Sadik to assume a particular role. Okay, let me just duplicate and copy the role. Everything that you create in AWS will have a Amazon resource name, right? ARN name. So for example, whatever we created as a role, this SA S3 permission for IAM, it will also have a ARN ID. So Amazon resource name with the list of combinations. So it will have AWS, it will have the service, account ID, then what kind of role that we have created. So I'll copy this and then I will allow Sadik to gain access to this particular IAM role. When he needs that for his routine work, he can go and gain the access now. Okay, let me just click on next and then maybe I can give some name, user access to S3. Maybe to for identification purpose, I will just use Sadik here, or maybe Sadik access to S3. Okay, so I'm giving him access to assume that role and then create the policy. I'll show you how to use that mechanism, right? So if I go to this role and then go and search for that S3 role, now if I just click on this, there will be a switch role option. In your day-to-day routine operational activities, or when you're performing certain hands-on activity, sometimes you might use this link or you might have option to switch the role. So if you go to Sadik account here, he will get an option to switch a role. And if you click on the switch role, it will take you to an option where you can go and enter the role and then access a particular set of certain resources or certain services in the same AWS account or even different AWS account also. Or else, like what you can do is there are two methods. You can just copy this link, or you can also use the switch role option. It will give the same console. If I just enter this switch role link, it will take me to a particular area where I can enter the IAM role that I have to use, and then I can also use some colors or fonts to differentiate. For example, I might be working on one account and I want to switch to another account to perform certain tasks. To differentiate it, you can use some colors and then do it. And then if you want to just change the display name, also you can change whatever name, but this is the default name it will have. It will have the role name at the AWS account which you are working, or the customer account which you are working. You can change the display name to for your better identification. So if you are making some changes, if you want to ensure that you have logged in with the right account and the right role, you can also check that and then click on switch role. It will take you to the console where you will have the access now. So if you click on this link, you can see that I have logged in with this particular role on this AWS account. And if you go to S3 now, I'll be able to see the S3 buckets with the same ID now. So this is how I can go and switch my role to perform regular activities. This is one of the method where I can assume the role that organization has created for performing the routine activities. So when you do this thing, there are two levels of auditing that happens. One, your user login, and then what kind of stuff you are assuming, all those logs will also get audited, as well as you will be there will be one more log which says when you switch the role, and then how long you are using that role, and what kind of activities you are performing using that role, and all those additional audit logs events will also be getting captured. So if you want to come out of that role, you can go here and then say switch back. So if you switch back, you will go back to the regular the regular login permission that you will get. So automatically you can see that it will change to Sadiq at account instead of the role at account. So that is how in organization you will perform a lot of regular tasks in your daily routine. On your daily operations routine, you might have to switch access to assume a role and then perform certain tasks, and then you can come back on that. So you have to be familiar with this. This is a common routine that you might see in some highly sensitive organization, but in some organization, whatever we saw yesterday, right, like creating a policy and attaching it to the group directly, that way you don't have to switch the user or switch the role to perform certain tasks. But in some organization, they don't want you to have always complete access all the time. Instead, only when you want to perform certain tasks or during a weekend, if you want to perform that activity, you assume that role for the weekend and then perform the task, and then you switch back to your normal account. So that way, whatever you are performing on a regular basis, you won't do any kind of modifications, or you won't by mistake there won't any accidental deletion or modification won't happen, because your user account will not have that privilege until you go and switch role to, or until you go and assume that role to perform the task. So this is one of the method that you can enforce the users to assume the role when they want to do certain activities and so on. So IAM role is very powerful. You can use it for assuming and accessing it. And also there is one more scenario which you can do. When you create a role, you can allow for EC2 or Lambda functions and other services also, right? See, for example, you might have an application running on EC2 instance, or you might be having some Lambda function which is checking for any new images or new logs, and then it might need permission for some other AWS services like databases or DynamoDB or S3, where it has to go and store the logs, or where it has to go and store the file which it has processed and so on. So maybe at the service level, at the application level, you might also have to give access for a particular service here. See, let's do one thing. I'll show a demo on that. Maybe let me go to EC2 instance. I know like we have not discussed about virtual machines, virtual servers and all, but this is just a demo. Just understand what I'm trying to convey as a demo, and the remaining detailed information about EC2, we will discuss it next week. Right. So now I will just create one EC2 instance for my demo purpose. So this is for demo server 1. And then I'll just go with any operating system for now. I just don't want to get into the details. I don't want to have a key pair for now. This is all fine. I will just go and create some default stuff without any complexity, right? Just for the demo, right? Yeah, I've created an instance. I will just log into the instance and then try to do some tasks. So it will take a minute or two for the instance to come online, right? Currently, it might be initializing. So generally, it takes 2 minutes for a virtual machine to be online in AWS platform. So let it initialize. So maybe I will create a role for the service to assume it, right? So I can just say which use case I want to use it, maybe from which services, right? You can give it for any service in AWS, right? Most of the services are listed here, but most commonly you will use these two services in 90% of the case. So I want EC2 system to assume that role or get that role permission to perform certain activities, right? So now, earlier example, I gave the role for an user to assume it and perform the task. But now, instead of an individual user, I'm trying to give the role for an application or for a EC2 instance, through which it can gain access for a particular AWS service and do the routine task. So here also I can give administrative access, or I want to give the same similar Amazon S3 full access. I can also give it, and then I can just say EC2, maybe just for my understanding, stan EC2 access to S3, then create the role. Okay, now once after I create the role, I can just go to my instance which I have launched, and then I can log into that. So just try to connect to it. It is still initializing. Maybe 2 minutes is not yet over. Is there a question? Someone tried unmuting his
Yeah,
mic.
I just
Sridhar.
unblocked it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, unmuting. Certainly, specifically, if I want to give only to S2,
Hmm.
what is that to be selected in the policies? Is there anything called specifically only for S2?
Yeah, S3, yeah, we can just select. There are hundreds of,
S3.
yeah, yeah, S3, simple storage service. Yeah, yeah. EC2 is
Oh,
the instance virtual server concept, right? So when you're creating a
okay.
role or when you're creating a policy, so for which service you want to create it is something you can select. So if you scroll down, you can select
Okay.
for which service or use case you are using it. There are a lot of use cases also, or there are a lot of services that are listed here. If you want the Lambda function to access S3 or EC2 to access RDS, relational database service, so the source from where you want to connect, maybe your web server is running, your application is running on EC2, and if you want
Mm,
this EC2 to access the relational database, for an example, that is a regular use case, right? You can go and select RDS, and then you can give access
mm,
for RDS full access, and from EC2 to RDS, this role will give permission, or like it will get the necessary privileges. So here, when you want to utilize that role, so what you can do is you can just go and I will show something before I attach it. You can just connect to it. Then let me connect here. Connect. So when I want to connect, and then yeah. So now I can just switch user to root, and then now if I just go and say I want to list, this is the command line, right? If I want to list all the uh, buckets in S3 service, currently I'm just using a command AWS S3 list, okay? But then it doesn't give me option. So there are two ways of doing it. One, I can programmatically configure the credentials using AWS configure command, and I can access it. Or else what I can do is I can just go to the actions here for that EC2 instance, and then I can go to the settings where I can go and attach it, right? Under the security, you have the modify IAM role. So here in the drop down, you can go and search for what I have created, stan EC2 access to S3, right? This is what I have created, and I can update the IAM role. So once after I update the IAM role, this EC2 instance as a virtual machine, it has got access to whatever services that I have selected or whatever policies that I have selected. Now, if I go here from my operating system, from my maybe for application, if the application want to store some images or store some logs or events into S3 bucket, now it should have the access. If I say AWS S3 LS, see it has started listing the bucket that I've got created, and the entire EC2 instance, whatever application that is running within this EC2 instance from the operating system level, from the application level, you have gained access to S3. So you can go and store it or whatever based on the access. If you want to read it or if you want to write something, you can do whatever task you want. So this is how you can attach a role to a particular service and gain access to another AWS service. So service to service also you can do. Also, you can use an user to assume a role to perform certain tasks on a service. So there are two common scenarios that you will see in your regular office activities. One, user will assume a role to gain access to a particular service and perform something. And you can also use a service to service permission. That is what we did now, right? EC2 access to S3 bucket through a role. So you can also attach and assume a role, and or else you can also switch role to gain access to perform a particular task. Right? These are the two common scenarios that you will. I mean, there are many other scenarios you will come across, but these are the very common steps which you will use for role-based access, or creating a role with certain privileges and then giving them the access with that particular restrictions. So any questions so far on the users, groups, roles, policies? account settings. So these are the five entities that you have to be familiar with to start with. But there are a lot of other things which you will discuss. So here to summarize, let me just go here. So IAM user is the individual account that we create for a human or a particular organization individual to log in and then gain access to to perform particular activities. Group is for a particular department or for a particular account support team or for a particular entity. You go and group them into a particular group, and then you give permissions for that group so that the individual users within that group will have the same level of access as that of their counterparts or colleagues, right? Role is something which you can use it for delegation for a particular user or a particular service to gain access to another AWS service. Permission is a JSON document through which you go and specify what kind of permissions, what kind of activities you can do, and all those things. So just to give you a little more detailed insight around the JSON document, this is how it looks like, right? Yesterday also we talked about it. Some people get confused with this SID. So in Active Directory, this is security ID, right? But in AWS, this is just a policy document. So IAM policy is a JSON document, and this refers to statement ID. Okay, statement ID, you can just say stan easy to access to S3 or easy to access to S3, whatever you want to give, you can give the statement here. That makes a meaningful naming, right? So statement ID is something you can give some meaningful line there, and then effect is always allow or deny. So sometimes you might have to deny performing certain activities, or if you want to just allow, explicit allow. By default, if you're creating a user, he does not get any kind of permission, so he will be able to log into that particular account, but he will not be able to do any kind of activities in that particular AWS account. So if you want to explicitly allow what kind of task, what kind of permissions, privileges that you want to assign, you have to go and assign it under the effect section, where you go and say action, and then you can mention these things. And sometimes some people will also use not actions, that is mainly to have the list of activities that you don't want him to get access to. You can also add that, but mostly like we will have this allow and then the action. I will also show some more examples where you have deny also. And condition I also showed you yesterday. So which range you have to log in to access those resources, because you don't want to allow the entire globe to have access, right? If you are just leaving without any condition, it means like 0.0.0/0. Anyone in the internet can access it, right? That is not a best practice, or that is not how you want to allow access, right? You have to have condition with source IP ranges. You can add comma separated value to have multiple CIDR ranges or multiple IP ranges. So that way, if the person is logging from that particular IP address range, only then he will be allowed to access. And most of the organization, they are also having a effective tagging practice. So when I say tagging, see, there are a lot of instances you might have. See, here I might have EC2 1, EC2 3, and then a lot of instances will be there, a lot of buckets will be there. And here, if you go to the tag, you can also use that tag in a very effective way. So here, if you say that this particular server belongs to department finance, and then you can also have something like this belongs to environment production. So what you can do is, in the IAM policy document, you can say this particular user will gain access only to the environment that is production, or only to the environment that is development. Maybe you might have some freshers or graduate engineers. For them, you don't want to give access for all the production environment. Instead, you want to give access only for the resources which are tagged as environment development or environment sandbox. So if you are just using that particular the tag in your IAM policy document, only the resources which are tagged as environment development or environment sandbox, only that they will have access to. And if you're a L1 user or L2 user, if you want to give access to non-production and production environment, you can just use the environment type, and then start selecting the, instead of going and selecting each and individual resources, you can also control access through the tagging that you have done on the resource level. So that is also an efficient way of doing it. So just for a couple of examples, let me show one more example here. So
Is the tag name case sensitive, Stan?
tag
Is that case sensitive?
tag, there are two things, right? Tag key is there, tag value is there, but tag keys, I guess, is case sensitive.
Okay.
But that's a very important question, right? Because when we go and do something, and then if you are using lower cases, then you might
Yeah,
end
yeah.
up
Just
in a
to pull
problem.
the
Yeah,
information.
very true. Yeah, one second. Oh, both are case sensitive in AWS. In Azure, keys are case sensitive, values are not. But here in AWS, both the keys and values are case sensitive. See here, because like there is a
Okay,
difference,
okay.
right? See, if you go and create a uh,
Uppercase.
yeah, see, yeah, that's true. So, for example, this is different and this is different. And in your policy document, if you are saying small lowercase PROD, then it will
Mm-hmm.
only check for
Yeah,
lowercase
yeah,
PROD.
that
Some
one.
people might have created by mistake a capital P at the beginning. Then this resource automatically they will
Yes.
get access because of the typo mistake. So in AWS,
Difference.
both
Yeah.
keys and values are case sensitive. Then you have to ensure that you
Okay.
are entering the right thing on the policy or permission document. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Okay, so coming back to another example here. So you can also use the effect as deny. So when you have two kind of policy effects, deny will always have the first priority, right? Deny will always override allow. If you don't have an explicit allow or explicit deny, by default, the person will not have access to do anything. And so you can also have which are the resources that should not be accessed, right? You can go and explicitly call out that the person should not have access to DynamoDB, and then these are the buckets that they should not have access to. And you can also mention which are the specific services or resources that they can access to. See, this is a very complex way of giving it, but some organization they might have defined it when the options were not available, but different organization might have created different policy documents. So the more you refer to examples and samples, you will get to understand why they have created and what is the reason behind it. Maybe over the period, you might also have to optimize it and streamline it. Otherwise, it might be challenging when there is a troubleshooting scenario or when you want to fix issues in a quick way. It will be very tough. So simplify the policy documents whenever time permits and situation permits. So that way, it should not have a lot of complications, right? So this is how a IAM policy document will get evaluated. As a support or a support engineer, as a solutions architect, you need to understand how the logic works, right? When someone has created a policy document, if it has got deny, allow, and all those combinations, so what it will do is by default, the document will be considered as a deny. Okay, so there won't be any kind of explicit permission for an individual. So the decision will start as a deny, and then it will go and check what are the applicable policies defined in that document, right? And then is there an explicit deny? If there is an explicit deny that is mentioned, then that will always win, right? Deny will always win over allow. And then if there is no deny that is configured in the policy document, then it will go and check whether there is an allow policy that is configured, then it will go and allow it. If there is no allow configured, then again final decision will be deny. So overall, deny will be ultimate winner if it is being defined in your document. So if you go to little more complex way of evaluating this, so this is multi-account, right? So earlier this is for a single account scenario, but then if you have multiple accounts which are having configuration through service control policies, and if you have multiple accounts under an organization, it will go and check first organization level, and it will check whether there is any policies that is organization has defined for the entire organization, and then only it will come to the resource based policy and identity based policy, and then the IAM based policy. So in a normal single account, it starts at the policy document level. But if your organization is more complex, and if you have multiple accounts, and it is controlled through AWS organization, see, AWS organization is a service. Okay, maybe don't get confused with the organization company, that naming, right? So organizations is a web service from AWS where you can go and group multiple different AWS account for centralized governance and management. So if there is any control or policy or restriction that has been defined at the organization level, that will take the first precedence. And if there is an implicit deny at the organization level, it will be denied. So if there is no deny for something at the organization level, it will go and check whether there are any resource-based policy that has been defined. If there is no resource-based policy control that has been defined, it will go and check the IAM level of identities and then the permission, then it will allow it. So in some troubleshooting, people will go and check IAM alone, and then they will think that there is nothing that has been restricted at the IAM level, and they might be uh, starting to troubleshoot something else. But you have to check all these things, whether this account is part of a particular AWS organization, and whether there is any AWS SCPs that are defined to control the list of activities that we can do, whether there is any AWS policy level stuff that they have configured. So there are one more service called AWS policy, where you can also go and check what kind of policies that they have got at the organization level. So, and then they call it as SCP, okay, service control policy. So you can go and check the service control policy, and then only you can come to the IAM level. If it is an enterprise organization, follow this structure. So that way you don't end up assuming that no restrictions at IAM means that user is entitled to do everything. It is not the case. So there might be some restrictions inheriting from the organization level, from the service control policy level, and so on. And then something at the IAM level as well. So let